Hello, I'm James Parker, the man who once thought love could be counted in deeds, in houses, in sacrifices. Turns out, I was just the ledger she kept to quiet her guilt. In Riverdale, the city where fortunes rose as quickly as towers did, people whispered about Emily Carter with awe and envy. Half the skyline bore her name, hence the moniker, Carter Half City. She was the queen of real estate, sharp in mind and sharper in stilettos. And me? I was the man she married 5 years ago, the man she once chased across the city with a stubborn kind of love that made me believe in forever. Each time she left me behind to chase after Lucas Wong, her so-called white moonlight, she gave me property. A house here, a loft there. That was her pattern, absence followed by asset. And like a fool with a quiet heart, I accepted every deed as if it were an apology wrapped in brick and steel. Today, I sat on the velvet couch of her corner office, the tallest floor in the Carter Financial Tower. The rain outside drummed softly on the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting ripples over the marble floor where her assistant had carefully placed the documents. She was watching the news. Lucas Wong had returned to the country. Her gaze clung to the screen like ivy, even as she absent-mindedly flipped through the real estate transfer agreement I had just handed her. I didn't need to look to know her signature would be clean, confident, without hesitation. That was how she signed every property to me. Every time she left, she made sure I had a new set of keys. Today's prize. Villa 1 in the western suburbs. The most exclusive Seaview estate in Riverdale. You couldn't even buy it with 10 lifetimes of savings. But to Emily, it was just another gesture. Another offering to clear her conscience. To me, it was number 100. I had chosen that one carefully. I wanted it. Not for the view. Not for the value. But for closure. She passed the signed agreement back to me with a little smirk, the one she always wore when she thought she was being generous. 60-something houses now, right? You're a small tycoon, she teased, twirling her pen like a magician playing sleight of hand. I caught the papers before they could slide from her polished desk and tucked them into my briefcase calmly. I didn't bother telling her this wasn't the 60-somethingth property. It was the last. It was the 100th. I didn't bother telling her the transfer agreement was sandwiched with something else, a divorce agreement, signed by me, awaiting only her signature. The first time she chased me was during college. She confessed 99 times. I rejected her each time, not because I didn't feel anything but because I was terrified of how much I did. On the 100th try, I gave in. She glowed that day. Like a girl who had finally won her destiny. We got married. And for a short while, I believed I'd done the right thing. Until Lucas came back into her life. I remember it clearly. Our first anniversary. I lit candles in our home, set the table with dishes I'd learned to make just for her, and waited in a suit I hadn't worn since our wedding. She didn't show. Instead, she sent her assistant with a file folder and a bouquet I was allergic to. Sorry, James. Something came up. Can you forgive me? She wrote in a note attached. I smelled someone else's cologne on the pages. But I forgave her. Of course I did. That night, I told myself I'd forgive her 99 more times. For fairness. For symmetry. That was number 1. Number 2 came fast. 3. 4. Dozens. And each time she left, another property was signed over like hush money. Until today. The 100th time. I had smiled when I realized it, relieved, not angry. I no longer flinched at the way she flinched away from my affection. I no longer chased her shadow down late-night corridors. I no longer begged. When she said, "Wait for me to come back," her voice was unusually soft, almost human. The old me might have clung to that sliver of warmth. Might have believed that promise. Might have cried for it. But the man she married had died sometime between property 27 and 46. I only nodded, watching the skyline behind her as if I were already halfway out the door. It was raining that evening when I stepped into Villa 1 for the first time. Everything smelled of pine wood and sea salt. She hadn't bothered to visit, just had it professionally cleaned and staged. The kind of perfect emptiness you can't live in. I stood on the deck, watching the lights of Riverdale blink in the distance. The countdown had begun. 30 days until the divorce took effect. 25 now. Emily didn't know yet. But I did. And I savored every minute of that knowledge. Over the next few days, her social media exploded. Photos of her and Lucas at amusement parks, wine tastings, lantern parades. The same places she used to say were too childish, too noisy, too public. I watched it all unfold from Villa 1 with the same calm you might have watching strangers on TV. Her assistant Daniel called me and said, "Sir, please come to the Xianxiao fireworks show tonight at 8. If anything goes wrong, President Carter said she'll never forgive me." He was the only one who ever called me, sir. The only one who knew the truth about our marriage. I didn't want to make his life harder, so I agreed. Xianxiao was crowded. Tourists everywhere. The kind of place I avoided, yet tonight I walked straight into the heart of it. My suit was too formal, my thoughts too numb. People buzzed about Mr. Carter and how lucky they were to be invited. I stood beneath the lanterns, blinking against the lights, and for a moment thought maybe just Maybest remember what she promised. But then I saw them. Emily. Lucas. Standing arm in arm at the best viewing spot. Fireworks bloomed behind them like lies wrapped in starlight. The crowd gasped as she took the mic. "To my dearest," she said, staring into Lucas's eyes, "thank you for waiting for me." A reporter leaned in toward Lucas, asking for a response. That's when her gaze darted through the crowd and found me. Her smile faltered. Her hand loosened from Lucas's. "James," she whispered. That single word silenced the entire square. Lucas looked at me with a cocked brow. "Who's that?" he asked. The reporter turned, expecting a scandal. And I smiled, stepping into the light. "I'm James Parker," I said casually, "Emily's cousin." She opened her mouth to stop me, but it was too late. My aunt asked me to check if my future brother-in-law was handsome enough. The laughter from the crowd moved the attention away. She nodded slowly, grateful for the lie. But I didn't do it for her. The rain came fast after that. The kind that drenches everything in seconds. People ran for cover. Emily rushed Lucas to his car. I was left standing in the rain, soaked to the bone, alone with a sky still burning in colors. I didn't feel the cold. You don't, after 5 years of being frozen. That night, I took a long, hot shower. When I walked out, she was waiting for me in the living room, wrapped in a coat she never wore indoors. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was low, like she hadn't used it for hours. "Thank you for covering for me. We're still in a secret marriage after all. If people knew, it would have hurt Lucas's reputation. But maybe one day, we can go public." She paused. "I'll find the right moment." I stared at her for a long time before answering. "You promised to spend tonight with me," I said quietly. Her expression changed. "I'm sorry. Next week no, I'll be on a business trip. Next month, maybe." "Let's talk about it then," I replied. She smiled. Satisfied. Hugged me gently and whispered, "I'll always be here." But all I could think of was how cold her arms felt. And in my heart, I whispered back, "Not anymore." 24 days left. I knew the countdown better than I knew the calendar. Each morning I crossed off a day with a red marker on the fridge, a private ritual I never explained to Emily. Not that she noticed. She had a habit of breezing past the kitchen like it was just a corridor to her closet, too full of business calls and unread texts to bother with something so domestic. That morning, I opened the fridge and found nothing but a half-empty bottle of white wine and expired almond milk. It struck me how symbolic that was. Everything in our marriage looked polished on the outside but had quietly expired when no one was looking. I closed the door and poured myself instant coffee. Bitter, acidic, exactly how I liked it lately. Daniel texted again. Mr. Parker, just a reminder. President Carter has arranged a private showing of the villa in the western suburbs the day after tomorrow. She'd like you to come. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over my phone screen. The villa in question was the same one she transferred to me last week, the one with ocean views and floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the sunrise like stained glass. Sure, I typed back. Let her know I'll be there. I didn't ask why. I already knew. I'd been moving my belongings out of our penthouse in secret. Quietly. A box here, a suitcase there. I didn't want a confrontation. Not because I feared one but because it felt beneath me now. A man doesn't argue with the person who's already erased him. He simply vanishes from the frame. 22 days left. Emily's stories online were full of wine glasses, resort rooftops, and that familiar silhouette beside her, Lucas Wong. They visited a seafood restaurant by the bay, one I had once begged her to try with me. Back then, she said it was unrefined, that the smell of shellfish clung to her clothes. Now, she was smiling over crab legs with a man who once abandoned her for overseas fame. The hypocrisy would have burned before. But now, I felt nothing. Only the faint bitterness of familiarity. On the 21st night, Daniel called me in a rush. Mr. Parker, please don't forget. The River Lantern Festival is tomorrow. President Carter insisted on attending with you. I paused. River lanterns. That day coincided with the Qixi festival, the so-called Chinese Valentine's Day. A coincidence? I wasn't sure. But I agreed anyway. Not because I cared. But because I wanted to see how far she'd go pretending things weren't ending. I arrived at the villa an hour early. It was silent, save for the soft clinking of wind chimes swaying in the ocean breeze. From the balcony, the city's skyline glittered like a mirage. I stood there for a while, waiting, the way I'd always waited for Herat dinners, in airports, in empty rooms with my phone screen glowing and unread. I checked the time. She was late. Again. An hour passed. Still no sign of her. I called Daniel. He stammered, "I'm so sorry, sir. There was a meeting," she said she'd be late. I hung up before he could finish. My phone buzzed with a notification. Emily had just posted a new story. There she was, standing next to Lucas on a ferry, releasing a lantern together. I watched them through my screen as the wind carried their wishes downriver. Her caption read, "Grateful to be with the person who matters most." I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I simply turned off my phone and poured myself a glass of scotch. The divorce would be official in a little over an hour. At 9:45 p.m., my lawyer sent a text, "Congratulations, Mr. Parker. The agreement has taken effect. Your documents will be delivered shortly." I stared at the message for a long time before setting the phone down. I didn't feel lighter. I didn't feel liberated. I just felt empty. As if the silence had finally become permanent. 10 minutes later, a delivery man rang the villa's gate. A slim envelope changed hands, and I opened it to find the pale blue divorce certificate inside. My name. Her name. Our marriage dissolved in clean font and 2 signatures. The finality of it struck Menet like a storm, but like a gentle hand closing a book I hadn't realized was finished. I packed the last of my belongings into a single suitcase. I didn't need much. Most of what I had in that house had been hers to begin with: gifts, furniture, all reminders of a role I'd played and outgrown. At 11:30, I hailed a cab to the airport. The rain had stopped, but the streets glistened with leftover drizzle. Streetlights shimmered on the asphalt like spilled gold. Traffic was heavier than expected, a backlog from earlier gridlock. As we approached the freeway entrance, another car swerved into view. Her car. I recognized the license plate before I saw her. Emily. She was speeding. Her headlights cut through the dark, slicing toward the western suburbs. Toward me. My driver cursed and swerved. Her car braked hard, stopping just feet from ours. She jumped out, rain smearing her mascara, panic splashed across her face. She ran to my window, knocking with urgency. "James," she shouted, though I couldn't hear her through the glass. I didn't lower it. The driver turned to me. "Sir, should I roll it down?" I shook my head. "No. Keep going. But, drive." She banged harder, her voice muffled by steel and silence. But I didn't look at her. I stared straight ahead, like she wasn't there. A few moments later, the highway patrol arrived. They escorted her away. The road cleared. The car moved forward. And as we passed the line of tail lights, I allowed myself one last glance. She stood soaked, breathless, defeated. For the first time in 5 years, I saw her chase me. But it was too late. At the airport, the staff were unusually polite. They offered me a VIP suite for the inconvenience. Apparently, my flight had been cancelled due to weather. But when I looked up, the sky outside was as clear as glass. No rain. No clouds. Just stars. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. I knew exactly who was behind it. At 2 a.m., there was a knock at the door. I opened it and saw her Emily. Exhausted. Dripping. Her eyes, bloodshot from crying or rain or both. She didn't speak at first. Just stood there, like a child caught outside a party she wasn't invited to. Finally, she whispered, "James, didn't we say we'd spend tonight together? Why are you leaving?" Her voice trembled. Vulnerable. Honest, maybe for the first time in years. But it didn't matter. I had nothing left to give her. I had already spent everything. My patience. My pride. My love. All gone. Burned at the altar of 100 betrayals. I sighed and stepped back, letting her into the suite. She looked around, surprised at the quiet elegance of the room. Her hands trembled as she reached for me. "I didn't know. You filed for divorce?" "When?" I didn't answer with words. I simply handed her the second copy of the divorce certificate. Her name printed beneath mine. Her signature. She stared at it like it was a foreign language. "This isn't real," she whispered. "I never agreed to this. I never said I wanted to end things." "You didn't need to," I replied. "Your actions signed it for you." She shook her head, violently now. "No. You're lying. This is a trick. We're not divorced." I didn't say yes. She lunged forward and grabbed my arm. "Tell me this isn't real." "Emily," I said slowly, "do you realize how crazy you sound right now?" Her breath caught. She stopped moving. Her hands dropped to her sides. I had never seen her so broken. Not when Lucas left her. Not when her company faced scandal. Only now when I finally walked away did she unravel. "Who looks more like the lunatic, Emily?" I asked quietly. "You now, or me 5 years ago, begging you not to leave, every single time. I'm sorry, she said, again and again. I was stupid. I thought I could have both. I thought you'd always stay. James, You just took me for granted, I finished for her. And now you're too late. Her tears spilled. Her body shook. The woman who once ruled Riverdale with a single press conference now stood barefoot in my suite, too shattered to lie, too late to fix what she broke. We had 15 days left on the calendar. But tonight? Tonight, everything ended. 15 days left. But that night, lying alone in the airport suite after Emily had finally left with swollen eyes and silent footsteps, I realized something important. There was nothing left between us to count down. The official end had already arrived. Everything else was just echoes. The next morning, I rebooked my flight to Clearwater. A quiet coastal city, not too far, not too familiar. I'd never lived there before. That was the point. I needed a place that didn't remind me of anniversary dinners missed, of her perfume lingering in elevators, of a man I didn't recognize anymore. The flight was short, the airport uncrowded. As I stepped off the plane, a crisp breeze welcomed me, different from Riverdale's heavy humidity. This one carried the scent of pine and distant ocean spray, a reminder that sometimes, a place can feel new even if nothing else does. The B&B I'd booked was a simple two-story house tucked between a book cafe and an antique flower shop. The landlady, a round-faced woman in her 50s with laugh lines and bright eyes, greeted me at the door with an apron dusted in flour. You must be Mr. Parker. We were wondering when you'd arrive. You look tired, honey. Trouble on the way? I offered a half-smile and shook my head. Everything's behind me now. She nodded as if she understood more than I said, then motioned me inside. Your room's upstairs. Breakfast is at 8, unless you're like the other city folk who prefer coffee and silence. I chuckled. Silence sounds about right. She patted my shoulder and added, well, if that ever gets too loud, the night bar next door serves comfort better than alcohol. That night, I went there. It wasn't the kind of bar I'd grown used to seeing with Emily, the ones dressed in glass and leather, where the menus didn't list prices and the music was more aesthetic than audible. No, this one was small, warm, and a little chaotic. Faded fairy lights draped across ceiling beams, a small corner stage hosted a girl with a raspy voice and a guitar, and the scent of fried food clung to the air like a loyal regular. I took a seat at the counter and asked for something weak. The bartender, who I initially mistook for a lanky young man, gave me a long stare before raising an eyebrow. Weak? You look like you need a kick to the teeth. I blinked, and she smirked. Just kidding. We've got something light and confusing. Fits your mood. She turned to grab a glass and poured a drink that looked like cranberry juice but smelled like citrus and regret. She slid it over to me, then leaned against the counter, inspecting me like a mechanic might a vintage engine. New in town? Is it that obvious? I took a sip. Sweet, then unexpectedly sour. I winced. What the hell is this? She tilted her head toward the chalkboard menu above. It's called life. Starts sweet. Ends bitter. With luck, you'll forget the middle. I chuckled, genuinely. That's clever. She grinned. I'm Sophie Lynn. Owner, bartender, and part-time therapist. You're James, I said simply. Parker. Well, James Parker, she said, holding out her hand dramatically. Welcome to nowhere. Over the next hour, we talked more than I expected. She wasn't trying to charm me, which was a relief. She was blunt, curious, and strangely good at letting silence breathe. I found myself telling her about things I hadn't spoken aloud in years, not about Emily directly, but about the weight of staying too long in the wrong place. She didn't push for details, just listened while wiping glasses or sprinkling salt on fries for another guest. "So what now?" she finally asked. "You hiding here, or starting over?" I looked down at my half-empty glass. "Maybe both." The next day, Sophie showed up outside my B&B in a beat-up gray SUV that looked like it had seen better decades. "Get in," she called out through the rolled-down window. "You said you were bored, and I need a distraction. Let's go see if this town has anything to offer besides overpriced artisan donuts." "Are you kidnapping me?" I joked, stepping into the passenger seat. She shrugged. "Only if you scream." She took me through winding roads, up hills that offered breathtaking views of Clearwater's coastline, and down hidden streets where local artists sold paintings directly from their garages. At a hole-in-the-wall seafood shack, she ordered double portions and told the cook not to put green onions in mine. "He looks like the type who hates green onions," she quipped. I paused. "How'd you know?" She winked. "I'm a bartender. Reading people is part of the job." Later, at a pop-up fair near the town square, she insisted I try the ring toss. I hadn't touched one since I was a kid, but somehow, I hit the center bottle on the first try. The vendor handed me a small stuffed fox. "You're lucky," Sophie said. "That's rare." "I think my luck's just starting to balance out," I replied. That night, as we drove back under the soft glow of old lampposts, she said, "You don't talk about her much. The one you left behind." I didn't respond right away. The car was quiet, the engine humming like a lullaby. "That's because talking won't change anything," I finally said. "And maybe I'm tired of holding on to things that don't want to stay." She didn't press further. Just turned on the radio and let a Spanish ballad fill the space between us. Over the next few days, we repeated the same rhythm. Morning coffee, casual adventures, occasional teasing. She took me hiking one morning and brought an extra pair of shoes in case mine gave out. I didn't ask how she knew my size. When we visited the planetarium and the inner hall tickets were sold out, she somehow got us up to the balcony with a better view. I should have questioned how she managed it, but I didn't. I was learning to enjoy without analysis. It wasn't until the beach day 12, by my count, that something changed. There was a fireworks show that night. Not the kind Emily would sponsor for publicity, but a humble, colorful one organized by local students. I stood with Sophie by the bridge, hands tucked into my coat pockets, the sea breeze brushing through my hair. A person in a rabbit costume wandered around handing flowers to couples. Odd, but endearing. One stopped in front of me and handed me a single eustoma. My favorite. Sophie laughed. "You have a secret admirer." I turned to her. "You didn't plan that?" "Nope." Her expression was strangely hesitant. "Actually, I didn't plan a lot of things. The first day, I didn't even know what to say to you. I've been watching you from afar. You looked heartbroken. I just didn't know how to help." I blinked. The bartender who had joked and teased me with effortless confidence suddenly looked fragile. "Honest. So you did plan something," I said softly. She bit her lip. "Only from the second day on. When I realized I wanted to be the reason you smiled again." The fireworks began behind us, casting red and gold into the night sky. I should have said something. But I didn't. I just stood there, watching colors burst above and realizing I didn't feel the urge to look back anymore. Not at Riverdale. Not at Emily. Just forward. Toward whatever this was. Day 11. The scent of eustomas still lingered faintly on my coat, a reminder that even strangers in rabbit suits could pull at memories you thought you buried. I spent the morning packing up the last few boxes in my temporary apartment. Sophie had offered to help, but I declined. Some things you have to put in boxes yourself, if only to remind yourself why you're leaving them behind. I loaded everything into the back of a small moving van I'd rented. My plan was simple: clear out all remaining traces of my old life, rent out the properties under my name, and donate anything I didn't want to keep. 100 properties. All transferred by a woman who once said she loved me, but whose love was always shaped like an apology. I sorted through the contracts with the precision of a man balancing ledgers, not because I was greedy, but because I wanted to make sure I'd never owe her anything again. Not even bitterness. Then, the phone rang. James, Daniel's voice came through, nervous, hesitant. President Carter, she asked me to call. She saw the listings. The rentals. I didn't answer immediately. So. She said, "Are you really moving to Clearwater for good?" I took a breath. I already did. Silence. Then, "She wants to meet you. Tonight. She said she'll come to the villa." I leaned against the truck, feeling the rough surface of the steering wheel under my palm. "Tell her to come. I won't be staying long." That night, I stood once again in Villa 1, the house with the sea view and the history I no longer claimed. I'd swept the floors. Emptied the closets. Left only 2 chairs facing the ocean. At precisely 7:30, I received a text: "I'm running late. Don't leave yet." No greeting. No explanation. Just urgency. But when the clock hit 8:15, she still hadn't shown. Instead, social media told the story: Lucas Wong, surrounded by candlelight and river lanterns, standing proudly on the ferry dock. Emily was behind him, head slightly bowed, hands clasped. I stared at the screen, watching her laugh at something he whispered. The wind carried their lanterns into the night. I remembered the promise she made: "Wait for me in the western suburbs tomorrow night." She hadn't said it casually. Her voice had been soft, deliberate. Like she meant it. But maybe she meant it for someone else. At 9 p.m., my lawyer messaged again. Transfer complete. Certificate delivered. 2 hours past the divorce activation. It was official. Our names no longer existed beside each other in the government registry. I waited another 20 minutes in that villa. No call. No text. Just silence. I walked to the window and looked at the river beyond. Lanterns floated by like tiny flames that refused to drown. I wondered if hers was among them. Did she make a wish? Did she spare a thought for me? Then I laughed. The kind of low, tired laugh that comes from realizing you've reached the very end of caring. The airport drive was smooth this time. No traffic. No strange encounters. But halfway there, as we exited the last tunnel, headlights cut across the divider. Her car. I'd recognize it even in a blizzard. Emily's red sports car swerved into view, screeched to a halt right beside the highway. And then she was out, running toward my taxi like the world was ending. She knocked on the window, face drenched in sweat and panic. The driver looked at me, alarmed. "Sir," she looked serious. "Should I?" "Keep driving," I said. "She's not my emergency anymore." Emily pounded the glass. I didn't flinch. The traffic patrol arrived, confused by the scene. They pulled her away gently, tried to calm her down. I still didn't look. Not until we were moving again, fading into the horizon. I glanced back once, just once. Her figure disappeared behind the rows of halted cars. In another life, I might have stopped. But not in this one. Not in the one where I had already left. At the airport, I checked in and moved toward the gate. And yet another twist. "Sir," the attendant said with a carefully practiced smile, "your flight has been cancelled due to unexpected weather activity." I looked outside. Not a cloud in sight. The stars practically screamed clarity. "Is this a joke?" "I'm sorry, sir." All flights to Clearwater are booked. The next available one is at 7 a.m. tomorrow. I didn't argue. I knew this wasn't an accident. I accepted the complimentary suite and let the staff guide me to a quiet lounge. Lavish. Overly polite. Suspiciously well prepared. And then came the knock. Soft. Hesitant. I opened the door and found her there, again Emily Carter, breathless, face flushed from the rush. She didn't speak right away. Just stood there, holding herself like if she didn't, she might shatter. James, she said finally, didn't we say we'd spend tonight together? I stared at her, unimpressed. That was before you spent the night with someone else. I didn't, she blurted. I didn't mean Toy just showed up and, save it, I said, turning away. She stepped inside anyway. I thought you were waiting for me. I was, I said. Until 2 hours ago. Now I'm just killing time. She bit her lip and finally saw the envelope on the table. Her eyes widened. This is the divorce certificate? Your copy, I said calmly. I left it at the villa, but I figured you wouldn't bother looking. She picked it up like it burned. I never agreed to this. Did you need to? I asked. You agreed with every flight you took to him. Every time you promised me something and broke it. But I didn't say yes, she yelled, suddenly emotional. I didn't say I didn't want us. No, I corrected, you just didn't say anything at all. She trembled. The woman I married, flawless, composed, calculating, was gone. In her place stood someone frantic, scared, lost. You can't mean this, she whispered. Tell me this was a bluff. A punishment. Something you're doing because you're mad. I'm not mad, I said. I'm exhausted. There's a difference. She fell silent. For a moment, her eyes gleamed with a familiar light. The one that used to melt me. The one that begged, wordless and raw. But I didn't respond. I didn't move. Then she broke. Fine, she said, breath hitching. You win. You want out. You got it. Just tell me one thing, was there someone else? Are you leaving me for someone? Her voice cracked on that last word. I smiled. Not cruelly. Just quietly. No. I'm leaving you for me. That shut her up. She didn't argue again. She didn't chase me down the corridor. She simply stood there as I turned away. The staff handled my rescheduled ticket with abnormal deference. I didn't ask questions. I just boarded. Emily didn't follow me to the gate. She didn't stop me at security. I suppose she understood this wasn't about who left whom. This was about who stayed too long. As the plane lifted off and Riverdale shrank beneath the clouds, I didn't look back once. I closed my eyes and let the hum of the engines drown out everything I used to feel. The past was done. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Clearwater greeted me with a breeze that smelled faintly of salt and citrus, like the promise of something clean, untouched, undemanding. The moment I stepped out of the airport and into the sunlight, I knew I wasn't just in a different city, I was in a different version of myself. The man who arrived here had no wife, no mansion, no designer suits tailored to match another person's image of him. What he had, instead, was space. And silence. And for the first time in years, it didn't feel lonely. It felt like oxygen. The landlady at the B&B greeted me with the same cheery affection, as if she had been waiting for me to return even though I'd never truly arrived until now. You look lighter, she said, squinting at me. Got rid of the storm, huh? I smiled. More like I learned how to walk through it. She handed me a room key, then added, Sophie dropped off some bread for you. Said you looked like the kind of man who forgot to eat when he's thinking too much. That made me laugh, soft and involuntary. Sophie. I hadn't told her I was coming back today. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to see her yet. But she had a way of showing up without asking permission and not in the invasive way Emily used to, as if occupying my life was her right. Sophie's presence was quieter. She lingered like music in the background, only becoming clear when you paused to really listen. I found her again, unsurprisingly, at the bar. Except now, the sign outside read, "Temporarily closed for renovations." The inside was gutted, furniture moved aside, bar stools stacked, boxes of supplies labeled in colorful marker. I stepped through the half-open door and found her on a ladder, wiping dust from a light fixture with an old t-shirt. "Hey," I said. She looked down at me, startled. "You're back." I nodded. "Flight made it this time. No mysterious weather." She smiled, and for a second, I saw a flicker of something complicated behind her expression. Relief, maybe. Or worry. Or both. "You hungry?" she asked. "Always." We sat on an overturned crate and shared a makeshift dinner of takeout dumplings and canned beer. The food was average, but the company made it feel like something more. I watched her as she ate quick bites, distracted, like her mind was elsewhere. "You all right?" I asked. She shrugged. "Just thinking. There's a fair in the next town tomorrow. I was planning to go, but I heard someone else is coming too." I raised an eyebrow. "Emily?" "Yeah." The name landed heavily between us. I didn't flinch. I just leaned back against the wall, feeling the cold seep through my shirt. "She still thinks there's something left to salvage." Sophie lowered her eyes. "And you?" "I don't," I said simply. "But I won't lie, it still burns sometimes. Not because I want her back. But because I can't believe I let her take so much from me without ever asking why." She nodded slowly. "I get that." After a pause, she added, "If I asked you to stay away from that fair tomorrow, would you?" I looked at her. She wasn't demanding. There was no manipulation in her tone. Only vulnerability. "I'd want to know why," I said. "Because she's not coming for the fair," Sophie whispered. "She's coming for you." I didn't sleep much that night. I watched the moon shift outside the window, tracing its slow arc over the rooftops of Clearwater. I wasn't nervous. Just bracing myself. By morning, I had made my decision. I met Sophie outside the B&B, where she stood leaning against her car, keys dangling in her fingers. "So, what's the plan?" she asked. "Let's go," I said. She blinked. "To the fair?" "To anywhere. Just don't leave me alone today." She smiled, relieved, and tossed me the keys. "Then you drive." We spent the morning sampling local food, dodging overpriced souvenirs, and watching a calligraphy artist write poems on leaves. She dragged me to a silly fortune-telling booth, and I humored her. "You're going to fall in love with someone who makes bad decisions but tries really hard," the old woman told me. Sophie burst out laughing. She just described me. I pretended to think about it. I was hoping for someone who makes good coffee and worse mistakes. "Hey," she said, nudging me, "I can work on the coffee." We stayed at the fair until the sun began to dip, and then I saw her. Emily. Standing at the edge of the festival grounds, hidden partially by a booth shaped like a carousel. She wore sunglasses and a neutral coat, as if anonymity could erase history. Her gaze wasn't on me, it was on Sophie. I didn't approach her. I didn't wave. I simply reached for Sophie's hand and pulled her toward the exit. She looked confused for a moment. "Did you see her?" I nodded. "She's not part of today." Sophie didn't ask more. But later, as we stood on the footbridge watching fireworks light up the sky, she murmured, "I didn't expect you to choose me." I turned to her. "You didn't ask me to." She bit her lip. "Still thank you." That night, we walked back to the car in silence, fingers still entwined. But just before we reached it, a figure stepped out from behind the bushes. A stuffed rabbit doll in hand. I froze. Emily removed the headgear and stared at me, her hair a tangled mess, her expression wild with something between hope and desperation. "James," she said breathlessly. "Can we talk?" I let go of Sophie's hand. "Wait for me in the car." "Are you sure?" she whispered. I nodded. "Give me 5 minutes. If I'm not back, just run her over." Sophie smiled despite herself and walked off. Emily's eyes never left mine. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I shouldn't have come. I saw you. With her. And it hit me. You're really gone." I didn't say anything. She stepped closer. "You were always there, James. Even when I ignored you, even when I lied. You never stopped showing up." "Until I did," I replied. Her lips trembled. "I told Lucas I couldn't do it anymore. That I couldn't keep pretending. He's gone. For good this time. So you came back to me." "No," she whispered. "I came back for me. But when I saw you with her I realized I still love you. I always have." Her words were soft, like feathers against an old bruise. And I believed her for the first time in a long time, I actually believed her. But that didn't mean I would stay. "I loved you too," I said. "Enough to wait. Enough to forgive. Enough to give you 100 chances. But now I love myself more." She nodded slowly, eyes filled with unshed tears. "I understand." "Do you?" I asked. "Because if you really did, you'd know why I have to go." She stepped back. Her voice cracked. "Then take care of yourself, James." "I finally am," I said. When I returned to the car, Sophie was sitting with her knees pulled to her chest, eyes searching mine. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go home." As we pulled away from the fairgrounds, I looked back one last time. Emily was still there, standing under the lights, the rabbit costume drooping in her hand. I hoped she'd find peace one day. But that story wasn't mine to write anymore. Mine was just beginning. The end came not with a bang or dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet rearrangement of daily life. In the weeks that followed that night at the fair, Emily Carter didn't reach out again. No letters, no late-night calls, no social media cryptic poetry. It was as if she had finally accepted what I'd known for a long time. Sometimes, even the deepest apologies arrive after the bridge has already burned. And me? I didn't spend my days waiting for her ghost to reappear. I spent them working beside Sophie, renovating her shuttered bar into something neither of us had imagined but both of us needed, a 24-hour diner that sold hot food, cold drinks, and the rare kind of comfort that didn't ask questions. We painted the walls ourselves, argued about which booths to keep, and let the regulars name the place. They settled on Midnight Toast. I liked it. It felt honest. We designed a rotating menu based on what Sophie called soul cravings. Some nights we served fried rice with pickled daikon and soft-boiled eggs. Others, it was grilled cheese and tomato soup with a shot of ginger ale on the side. I became the unofficial menu curator, and Sophie, who had no patience for recipes, became the heart of the place, laughing with customers, playing music from a dusty jukebox, sometimes dancing barefoot when the night was quiet and the moonlight was kind. I didn't tell her how much I admired that ease, but I think she knew. You can't fake that kind of freedom. One afternoon, the landlady from the B&B came in carrying 2 large bags of Tupperware. "Just a thank you," she said, eyes glinting with mischief. "And also when's the wedding?" Sophie choked on her lemonade, and I blinked. It's not yet," Sophie cut in, wiping her mouth, "but he's getting there." She looked me dead in the eye, daring me to flinch. I didn't. "We'll let you know when we start house hunting." She grinned. The landlady left with a satisfied chuckle, and I turned to Sophie. "Do you mean that?" "Mean what?" she asked, taking another sip like it was no big deal. "The house thing." She lowered the glass. "Only if we build it ourselves. Or buy one that doesn't come with ghosts." "Agreed," I said, and for the first time in a long time, the word future didn't feel like a threat. Still, closure has a way of sneaking back when you least expect it. It was late August, and Clearwater's coastal winds were growing warmer. I was restocking the drink cooler when Sophie came into the back room holding a crisp envelope. "This came for you." I opened it slowly. Inside was a check. A large one. Accompanying it was a short note in delicate cursive. "James, I transferred ownership of all the properties into a holding account. I know you don't want them, but you deserve them. It's not payment. It's acknowledgement. Take it or leave it. I won't reach out again. E." I stared at the check. 100 properties, distilled into a single slip of printed paper. "She's letting go," I muttered. Sophie peeked over my shoulder. "You gonna cash it?" "No," I said, placing it gently back into the envelope. "But I'll keep it. Not as a keepsake. Just as proof that some things really do end." Later that night, I sat on the front step of the diner while Sophie cleaned up inside. The street was quiet, bathed in gold by the flickering neon sign above. I watched a cat slink across the sidewalk, tail high, as if it owned the night. And in that moment, I realized I had stopped measuring my life in what I'd lost. I measured it now in small victories: Sophie's laugh, the way customers said my name like I belonged here, the crackle of fresh oil hitting the fryer at 3 a.m. She joined me on the steps, sitting close enough that our shoulders touched. "You thinking again?" she asked, teasing. "Always. Want to tell me about it?" I turned to her, eyes tracing the curve of her cheek, the soft way her hair curled behind her ears. "I was thinking," I said slowly, "about the fact that I spent 5 years with someone who didn't know how to stay. And now I'm with someone who didn't even ask me to." Sophie tilted her head. "You think I don't want you to stay?" "I think," I whispered, "you want me to choose it. Freely." She smiled. "That's the only kind of choice that counts." And it hit. Mesh was right. Love wasn't a debt or a duty or a prize. It was the quiet, consistent decision to show up. To try. To forgive without forgetting. To heal without hurrying. And maybe, just maybe, to build something that didn't need grand gestures to be real. We sat there for a long time, saying nothing. Just letting the night wrap around us like a soft coat. Eventually, Sophie leaned her head on my shoulder. "You know," she murmured, "I might not have 100 houses, but I've got a hell of a scrambled egg recipe and a coffee machine that never breaks." "You've got me," I added. "That too," she said, pretending not to smile. The past didn't vanish. But it softened, like old scars that no longer stung when touched. Emily Carter had been a chapter long, painful, formative. But she was not the story. This was the story. The open diner at midnight. The girl with chipped nail polish and too much heart. The man who finally learned how to leave, not because he hated what was behind but because he finally loved what was ahead. Somewhere in Clearwater, the ocean breathed in and out, calm and rhythmic, like a promise whispered beneath the stars. And for the first time in my life, I believed it.